Shalom, this is Shira Sherbo coming to you from Sfat, Israel, and Tour for the Nations. When I was 38 years old and my 6 children were 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14, I started something called Family Night. And every Wednesday night I would gather my children around the table and we would have a nice dinner, a festive meal, and we would have games and prizes and a Bible story. And I was at a point in my life where I was coming out of church, the establishment of church, and I was doing more things organically, more things at home, kind of like back in the day when they taught in the tents. Abraham and Sarah taught people in their tents, and Noah's son Shem taught from his tents. And so there was a lot of people in my circle, in my community, that were wanting to just simplify the relationship with God. We wanted spirituality, we wanted prayer, we wanted meditation, we wanted connection with God, we wanted something to pass down to our children, we wanted to be moral and righteous people, but we didn't want all of the things that come with the entity of church and denominations. So looking back, this is one of my kids' favorite memories, this thing that we did on Wednesday nights called Family Night, and we learned about God, and it really worked. And I prayed for my children. So I was just a mother teaching my children in the home, in the tent, and this worked. But I can also look back and see the things that tripped me up. And so if you are here right now and you're watching Tour for the Nations, I'm guessing that you had a similar journey as me. And the same things that tripped me up tripped you up, because they're very powerful parts of our culture and our society. I remember when I was 12 years old and I read the Bible for the first time because missionaries had come to our door. And one of the things that they said to my mom, and then later to me when I started having Bible studies, was, this is the Old Testament, this is the New Testament, but we're no longer under the law. We're no longer under the law of Moses. So now I can tell you, if a Jewish person hears one non-Jewish person say to another non-Jewish person, we're no longer under the law, he's going to say, what are you talking about? Only the Jews were under the law. The Jews were under the law of Moses. And we all know the Jewish people have a lot of laws. We have kosher laws, family purity laws, Shabbat laws, and the rest of the world, 99.8% of the world, doesn't have all these laws. But we do know that we have laws. Of course we have laws, like Adam and Eve and Noah and everyone right from the beginning. They knew, it's not okay to murder. It's not okay to steal. You're not supposed to sleep with another man's wife. You're supposed to be kind to animals. We know the basics. We know there were always laws for mankind to follow. So going back to this thing of being told that this part of the Bible is old, that's what tripped me up. And I think it's probably what tripped a lot of people up. Because once you start on that path, and once you call what God came down and gave to Moses and the connection between heaven and earth, once you call that old, then you start off in the wrong direction. And so what I learned to do probably in my 50s, and what probably most of you who are listening right now to Tour for the Nations, you started to say, well, wait a minute, what if that's not old? What if that Word of God is alive and well and eternal and infinite? And what if I'm supposed to reconnect with Moses, and that's how I reach my full potential? And it's not the Old Testament, it's the only Testament. And so that's what was the thing that was the missing piece for me. That's what I didn't get, because I believed that something new happened. And when I finally realized that I had to reconnect to my spiritual inheritance, I had to reconnect to Mount Sinai, then I realized that the whole purpose of the Jewish people, the reason they've been preserved all these years for the nations, is to teach the nations how to get back to the tents of Shem, how to get back to learning in the tents. You know, the prophet Bilam said when he looked out in the wilderness and he saw the Israelites, he said, "How goodly are your tents, O Jacob." And so something revolutionary was going on in the world, and the nations recognized this. Like, what is this that's going on in these tents? The parents are teaching the children in their tents at home. There's discipleship going on. There's mentoring going on. It's just a simple home-style, organic way of teaching. And it started as soon as, Noah, after the flood, Noah's son Shem, he opened a school and people learned in the tents of Shem. And then Sarah and Abraham, they taught people in their tents, and they practiced hospitality in their tents. And so when I was doing things at home and in my community, many people were feeling a draw to come away from the denominations and come away from just the whole church scene, and just to do things more naturally and organically and in the home and with the family. The thing that we missed was that we had to go all the way back to the beginning, all the way back to the Torah. What we did was we said things like, we need to get back to the book of Acts. We need to get back to the original church in Acts. Well, what if we need to go back even farther than that? And that's, if you're listening now, you probably have realized we need to go all the way back to Noah. We need to go all the way back to the tents of Shem, to the learning at home, because Noah was called a righteous man, and that's all most of us want. We just want to be righteous. We want to do what God wants us to do. We want to reach our full potential. We want to know, what are we here for? And if somebody came up to Noah and they said, "Noah, why are you building an ark?" he would have said, "Because God said so." And so to be a righteous person, there it is. There's your definition. To do what God says because he said so. Because he is king, and we are doing on earth as it is in heaven. We're bringing heaven down to earth. We are asking God, we're lining up with his will. We're saying, your will be done. That's what Noah did. And he was a righteous man. And so many of us, it took us like so long, but that's the way it was supposed to be. That's the way it's meant to be. Because if it's easy, then there's no pleasure. There's not as much of a prize. It's just like in the stock market, if you see something at the early stages and you get in on the ground floor, the payoff is big. And so right now we are on the ground floor of realizing that the Old Testament isn't old. The Old Testament is infinite, it's forever, it's God's eternal word, and we need to reconnect with Moses, and we need to reconnect with the Jewish people who have been preserved all these years to tell the nations, you need to be righteous the way that Noah was righteous. You need to follow the laws that were given to Adam and Eve and to Noah, and you need to just do things that God tells you to do because he said so. And once you do that, and it's so freeing to know that you don't have to be involved in religion or the new definitions of what is righteous, but you can go all the way back to the beginning, and you can connect with the way that it was in the beginning. And you know what? Here we are. I'm in my tent. You're in your tent. And God has made it possible for us to connect just in the simplicity of our tents. So you can get your coffee, you can get your drink, we can sit, we can talk, you can learn over the internet. Your tent and my tent, we connect. And that's the way it was in the beginning. Shem taught people in the tents of Shem. Abraham and Sarah taught people in their tents. They taught them hospitality, how to thank God for their food. Then when we had the generations of Moses and all Jacob's descendants, and they're in Mount Sinai in the desert, and the prophet Bilam looked down and he said, "How goodly are your tents, O Jacob." And what he was seeing was parents teaching their children in the home, in the tent, teaching their children how to read. And that's so normal for us, but that was revolutionary at that time. And also the way that the tents were set up in such a way that there was modesty. You couldn't see inside someone else's tent. They sat there, they brought new things into the world, revolutionary things into the world, teaching children at a young age how to read, parents teaching their children about God, modesty. And it's a message that's supposed to go out to all the nations. And the Jews have been preserved all these years so that people can notice that, and so that people can reconnect to Moses, and therefore be reconnected to the simplicity of being a righteous person, just the way that Noah was. Just doing what God told him to do, just doing because God said so. That's why I do it. He's my king. His kingdom come. His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's really that simple. So that's what we're doing here at Tour for the Nations, where I know that your journey has probably been a lot like mine. You've wanted to come out of religion, and you want prayer, you want spirituality, you want connection, and you're like, how do I get that? What do I pass down to my children? What inheritance do I give my children? Well, you just reconnect with Moses. You reconnect with that marriage and that oneness. And then you go all the way back to the way that it was, the simple way that it was of learning in the tents. It's not an institution. It's not a government. It's not a big brother coming around and saying, convert or die. All it is people mentoring other people. It's an organic relationships. It's bettering ourselves. It's when you finally get here, you're finally like, oh, this is my whole life has led me to this moment. But each of us that has gotten here, we have wanted the truth as much as we wanted air. And if you don't just go after the truth, you might end up somewhere else. And so I should say, kol hakavod. Kol hakavod means much respect to everyone that has sought after God and come to the realization that there's no such thing as the Old Testament. It's the only testament. It's the only word we have from God, and it's our way to Him. It's our connection, and we have to connect to Him and just do what He says to do because He said so. Okay, in the end, everybody's going to know this. But just like with the stock market, just like betting on a horse that's 80 to 1, the prize comes because you see something that most people don't see, or you see it before them. There's going to come a time when everybody sees this and it's obvious. But right now you're on the ground floor. Right now you are seeing things that most people don't see. And so that's why I say, kol hakavod. Let's just learn together in our tents and just be happy. It's miraculous that you were able to come out of all the delusion in the world and to just really be able to have that insight. And it's going to bless your life, and it's going to leave you with an inheritance to leave to your children, the true infinite inheritance, the eternal forever inheritance that is going to be here long after you're here. And hopefully the people that you influence will benefit from all the work that you've done, all the studying that you've done, all the research that you've done, and your ability to come out of, just like Abraham had to leave behind his society, we've left behind our culture. Noah was alone in his world. We know what it's like to feel alone and to feel like, I see something, why doesn't everybody else see something? It's kind of like hidden in plain sight, and in the end, everybody is going to see it. But it is something really great to be one of the first people to see something, and it's not something new. It's just returning to something that's always been there, and now we're just having eyes to see it. Okay, that's all for now. Shabbat shalom, and happy Friday, happy weekend.